This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
I had this idea that I felt really strongly about, and I was like, this could be cool. I'd like to see this happen. And I just made it happen. I figured it out. I maxed out every card that I had. You know, all of my financial efforts went into seeing that first year.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back to another episode of Do It for a Living. I'm Todd Ersley, and today I've got Chris Stewart of GridLife. Chris, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I really appreciate you coming on board with us. I know we've had, the usual fun of trying to get the interview recorded with SEMA and then Super Lab Battle. So there's been lots of stuff going on. But
yeah, it's the off season, or the beginning of the off season, seems to be more busy than the season itself.
Yeah, because now you're into kind of full planning mode or finishing up everything and then planning for the next stuff. So yeah, I've never, I've got to be honest, I've never actually made it out to one of the GridLife events, but I really want to, just because I have lots of Time Attack style friends that go to lots of the events and they look like a lot of fun. And so, just wanted to get you on here and kind of hear your story and, why and how you started GridLife and where you see it going. So, just go ahead and get us started of, how did you get into automotive, or where did you, how did you get started growing up as a kid?
So I grew up in Detroit, not necessarily completely steeped in car culture, but both my uncles worked for GM and was always relatively into cars. I was into a lot of things, but it's not like I grew up wrenching in the garage with my dad or anything like that. So cars kind of came into the picture when I was able to drive them. I remember my first car was a Civic, but my friend had an Escort GT, and he was putting aftermarket fog lights on it and kind of getting into all the AutoZone bolt-ons and things of that nature. So just by happen chance of influence, that's kind of where automotive enthusiasm started for me. So there was kind of a small buzz as I was a kid, but it really was when I started being able to dig into the project of customizing my car that it really kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so did you end up going to college?
Yeah. So I went to art school actually. So I went to art school for graphic design, or visual communications, I think is what it was called.
Visual communications. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
I think at that time they were trying to figure out what to call marketing, in general. But it basically was strategic design is what I went to school for. So I went to a school called Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the west side of the Mitten. I went for graphic design. And at that point, I was pretty deep into car stuff. So I was in art school, and doing art school stuff during the day. But then, at night, it was wrenching on my CRX with my friends and starting little car crews and basically doing all car stuff. And then, ultimately, that stuff kind of merged together a little bit. So
gotcha. So, out of college, did you get a graphic design job?
Yeah. So my career path, I started my first job out of school was with a company called Shape Corporation, and I was the graphic design coordinator, which basically meant I did everything that needed any type of design, from the the pamphlets and the kind of the weekly informational employee sheets that went in front of the urinals on the factory floor, to the website, to all of the photography, and everything of that nature. So it was, it was kind of an interesting blend where I was, I was in this manufacturing, company in the offices doing design work. But I had that job, so that was my first job out. And being from Detroit, and my uncles worked at GM for 25 years, had one job. My mom had one job her entire life, so I just assumed that was my job. So and for me, I ended up getting fired from that job.
Okay.
After like 2 years, and I was running a website called EFHonda at the time, which was basically a forum back in the forum days, dedicated to the EF chassis Civics. So 88 to 91 CRXs and Civics and Honda stuff. So when I got fired, they actually brought me into their office, and they had this sheet of all the internet usage of every employee in the company, and there was a bar graph. Mine was, all the way to the end of the sheet, and then the next person down was just a little tiny sliver by comparison to me. And all that time was spent on EFHonda, which is basically talking to my friends about cars during my 9 to 5.
Okay, on the company dime, huh?
Yeah. So, kind of the next path of my career was I got let go from that job. Didn't quite know what I was going to do. Put a bunch of feelers out. Started putting my design book out, and ended up getting a couple of different offers, and took one with an ad agency called Justice and Monroe. And Justice and Monroe was a smaller ad agency in Grand Rapids, and their clients were all of the automotive dealerships under the Fox Motors brand, which is like a big. Okay. They have Ford dealerships and Honda dealerships and Mitsubishi dealerships. And a bunch of other things. And then it was with that job that I fell in love with advertising, and the difference being between design and advertising is advertising has more of a storytelling element to it. You're creating potentially commercials or more campaign narratives where you're looking at a whole bunch of different things and how they work together to, ultimately sell someone a product or one that something is, the way that you want them to see it. So that kind of began my advertising career and that path. And that kind of ran, it all kind of ran parallel with like my automotive enthusiasm, because I was working on a bunch of stuff for these car dealerships. So that was really cool to be able to do, even though it was regional stuff. We did do TV commercials and, things for all those dealerships. So that was pretty rad. And at the same time in my kind of personal life, I was still building EFHonda, and it wasn't necessarily frowned upon in the ad agency. So like just the environment, or the working environment of agencies versus corporate.
They were more concerned with did you or did you not get your work done.
Yeah,
that kind of deal.
Yeah, in the corporate environment, it was more of like a clock punching kind of environment. Yeah. So like the shop employees or the people on the floor have to be there at 9, so you got to be there at 9. And in ad agencies, what I discovered, is they put a focus on making sure the creatives have an environment that they feel comfortable to be creative in. So a little bit more lenient with start time, a little bit celebration of extracurricular activities. So, it was never kind of frowned upon, the stuff that I did outside of work. And I was able to kind of blend some of that stuff, being that I was working on car dealership things, where like that became an asset to that company. The fact that I knew a lot about cars, versus a detriment, with the previous job. So, all the advertising stuff kind of plays into, GridLife ultimately, because it's how we kind of approach the build of our events. But, the rest of my kind of career path is I dove deep into advertising for a long time, and advertising is the type of career that it's not really a job. It's kind of what you do. So you got to embed yourself in it pretty intensely to be successful at it and to push yourself through the ranks. So I did that. I was still doing a lot of car stuff, and still doing that, outside of work, but I was using that as like an attribute as I, moved through my career. I know a lot about cars, so I was really fortunate to be able to move through a bunch of different agencies on a bunch of different accounts that was able to use that as a strength. So in Grand Rapids, I was working in that agency for a little while and then got recruited by an agency in Chicago called JWT. And that was not necessarily a move into like an automotive segment in the ad world, but it took me out of a small market and into a bigger market, which kind of propelled my career in advertising. So I worked there for about a year, working on a bunch of different accounts, and then I ended up taking a position working on the Pampers account for a very brief spirit.
But that was exciting.
Before I had kids, but I met a creative director when I moved to that next agency, who left to rebuild the team for Harley Davidson. And then I was there with that agency on the Pampers account for about 4 months before I moved over to the Harley account. And then I worked on Harley Davidson, doing all of their model year launches and a bunch of stuff, for them, for a couple of years. So that was very much in the wheelhouse of stuff I was in. I was into motorcycles at the time. I was still doing car stuff, but I actually kind of faded out of car culture for a little bit because I moved to Chicago. It was much more difficult to like keep a car and work on a car because I live and still live in the city. All this, plays into GridLife still because I'm learning about marketing. I'm learning about larger campaigns. I'm learning about experience design and all types of things. And then I ultimately left the Harley account after about 2 years and got brought to work on the Craftsman account with another agency. And with that, I was doing all this stuff in the digital space. So advertising is a little bit segmented, where you've got people who produce TV commercials. That's kind of one team. And then you've got people who do print ads. That's kind of another team. I worked specifically in the digital space. And at that time, I started getting into digital physical advertising, which is basically like experiences. So, thinking about, it was like projection mapping and a bunch of different things where you're like actually throwing events that have these digital components on behalf of a brand. So I did a few of those, and really enjoyed that aspect of it, of kind of taking all I know about design and marketing and, that type of strategic thinking and applying it to physical, tangible events. So that's kind of the one career path, the thing that's happening in my professional life. At the same time, still doing car events, to talk about kind of the genesis of GridLife and how that came about. While we were still in college, I was throwing these. I used to go to this event called the Niagara CRX Meet. The Niagara CRX Meet was in Niagara Falls. It was an only CRX event, and I just thought it was the coolest. We would all the like CRX and the EFHonda buddies would get together, and we'd cruise from Michigan to Niagara Falls, and it was just a meet like any other meet nowadays, but specifically focused on CRXs. And that kind of inspired me to start a smaller meet in West Michigan, which we called the West Michigan Honda Meet, which was basically like a barbecue for the buddies. And then, it was the very beginnings of the community that would ultimately evolve into what GridLife is today. So the first 3 of those events were parking lot meetups.
Okay.
So just like any other parking lot meetup. And then at some point, my friend Peter, he had a 99 SI or 2000 SI, And just in regards to like the trends of tuning, he started getting these race car parts from Japan. So
I remember, like, what time frame was this?
This is 2001.
Like okay, yeah.
2001, yeah, so early 2000s. So he bought that car new, and like he had the newest car out of all of us.
After a couple years, he was starting to put stuff on it.
The 88 CRXs, and he buys this car, dives right into modifying it, and he started getting all these race car bits. He had spoon wheels that he got from Japan. It was the first set I'd ever seen in real life. And he's basically building a track car using the inspiration of like what he sees on Honda Tech, but none of us had tracked our cars at that point, but we all like collectively as a group started moving towards that direction of style, so to speak. From like 2002, I can't remember who did their first track day. I can't remember if it was me or if it was my buddy Luke. But one of us, decided we're gonna start tracking. And at that time, it was pretty difficult to do, or at least it was difficult to find peers in grassroots motorsports. So like we've got these riced out Hondas. We're younger kids, and the options I think were NASA, SCCA, like the BMW club, the Porsche owners club, and that was pretty much it.
Definitely not going to get into those groups, huh?
Well, I mean, you could get into them, but show up with a CRX with clear taillights and whatever, and it wasn't necessarily all that welcoming of an environment. It was relatively intimidating, and I remember going to the ITR Expo in 2001 or 2 when it was at Gingerman Raceway, and even that event, like the ITR Expo is basically a sister event to us now. Like we're super good friends with everybody who puts that on, but at that point the ITRs were still new, so it was like even that event was like, it felt like a little bit of a closed gate environment. They were only welcoming ITRs at that point. So I think I ended up doing a track day with NASA at Putnam Park, and I had a pretty good time, but I still felt like a little bit outside of that community, coming in at that particular time. And we went to that ITR Expo at Gingerman Raceway, and then at some point we found out that you can actually rent a racetrack. So we were doing this parking lot meet. We're starting to get into like tracking very loosely, and we're like, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if we did the West Michigan Honda Meet at Gingerman Raceway? So we dug a little bit deeper into the process of what it would take to make that happen, and then found out how much it costs, and all of the buddies pooled our money together to rent that track on a Monday, and that became West Michigan Honda Meet 4, which was the first track event we ever produced. That was in 2004, and we did not know what we were doing. Luckily enough, able to like kind of hire the track and get a grid worker, and like they had corner workers, the
safety crew and all the important stuff.
All that stuff was a little bit turnkey, and like we did, I think, registration like via email or some archaic method. I was like tracking spreadsheets, and I remember like sitting in my my living room, like stuffing envelopes and doing all these very, very, very manual things for what was the biggest event we had ever, even dreamed of putting together. So the story.
I wanted to ask you, like, for that event, were you utilizing that forum that you had created to kind of talk to everybody about what, where you were going to go?
So I think there was a couple other like track days that were and a couple other forums that we were using too. So I think there was Club SI was a forum that had come about like when the 99 2000 SI happened, and I think they had a track day also at Gingerman, but we were like kind of tapping into like Honda Tech and EFHonda, and I mean it was pre-Facebook, pre-social media, so it was a whole bunch of forum posting to try and build that initial audience.
Okay, yeah, so you're just saying like, hey, we're going to rent the track out. You talk in person with like 20 of your buddies, and then you're like, hey, we're going to rent this out. Here's how much it is. Do you want to do it, kind of deal?
Even at that point, I was marketing it, so that like goes into like my background in advertising is I campaigned it. So like it had a logo, and it had its own branding, and I like positioned it not it was like presented to people, versus, like we talked, more casually about it behind the scenes of who's going to do it. But like, I always like presented everything, even when I did the Honda meets, it's like all of it, each one had its own unique logo. We did a t-shirt for it. I had like little lanyards that I was like laminating in my bedroom, and like, putting all these like different branding elements behind it, which comes back to kind of my, my marketing background, and the way that I like approached things. So, even at that time, I was kind of building a brand around it all, and a little bit more of a robust experience, versus, it being more of like I don't know how you would describe like a casual, presentation of it, if that makes sense. So it was built very grassroots, but it was presented, like I've always tried to present everything with a level of professionalism and polish, so that it feels special and unique. So even Honda Meet 4, has those things, and there's some people in the community that like bust out their Honda Meet 4 shirts. They're
they're proud of it, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's it's really humbling and cool to see people, that are still tracking with us.
So did you have a good turnout at that event?
I think we maybe broke even. It was on a Monday, and I can't quite recall the numbers, but it was a good enough event for us to do it again.
Yeah.
So, the second year, Honda Meet 5, that was, again on a Monday, but, I can't remember. We ended up switching to like this 2-day format, I think at Honda Meet 6 or 7, and these are all corresponding with the years. So Honda Meet 5 is 2005, Honda Meet 6 is 2006. But the fifth year, I think, 5th or 6th year was like really close to 4th of July. So, we had been gaining a lot of momentum. Like the second year of Honda Meet was a little bit bigger, and then the year that was that 4th of July year, which I think was Honda Meet 6, that event was really big. We sold out of the track spots ahead of time, and we ended up with 1,500 spectators, or just people that came out. So it was like that idea of like what was originally a parking lot meet, in combination with a track day, actually kind of came to fruition. And I think mostly because it was so close to the holiday. I think it was on the 5th. So everybody like had Monday off, but the holiday was the day before. So people were looking for something to do.
Yeah.
A bunch of people came out, and we were like, it was, I think, Gingerman's biggest attended event at that time. And
so you're combining like a car show still, or just a meet with the track day?
Meet, so it was just positioned as a meet, and like we did like a big like kind of family style barbecue, as a part of it, and like had some other like little experiences that were built into it, just little cool things. But I was just doing what I thought was cool, like an event I wanted to attend. I was throwing a party for my friends, so like there wasn't like a lot of thought about strategic growth of Honda Meet or like where it's going. It certainly wasn't a business, and we ended up moving it to a 2-day format, and that's when like kind of the idea of this track overnight multi-day destination event really started to take shape. So when we moved it to a 2-day event, and we did an event on Saturday, Sunday, this is still like all our peers, right? So like at that time, there wasn't a place for my peers to go and get into tracking, so like you were going into somebody else's world, whether it be NASA, SCCA, the Porsche Club, so like this community was just kind of naturally building because people were bringing their friends, and they're like, "Oh, you're really into Hondas. You should come out and do this. Honda Meet's so much fun. Getting on the track is so much fun." And we were lucky enough to have a home track like Gingerman Raceway, where it's pretty low risk. That particular facility, there isn't any walls to hit. Like the intimidation factor as a racetrack is pretty low. So I think all that stuff worked in our favor. But Honda Meet just continued to grow. Organically it was building and getting a ton of momentum year after year. By the time we got to like Honda Meet 10, 2010, 2009, 2010, we would put registration up in February, and the event would sell out like within 20 minutes.
Nice. Okay.
So like it's like track day Coachella, so like everybody's clamoring for the spots. I had to start doing this pre-sale strategy and all this other stuff, and then it became kind of the centerpiece, or at least what I was noticing, is it was becoming the centerpiece for people's summers. So it's like they were building cars around it. The people were planning family vacations around it, or other vacations around it, and making sure that they can't miss Honda Meet, and it became kind of this family reunion type vibe, or this this good old time party vibe over the course of the 2 days, because everyone would camp, like the whole, everyone would come,
they'd stay out there,
they'd stay there, and there's all this intermingling amongst like these circles of friends, and relationships are being formed, and like it really was becoming this Midwest community, of younger track enthusiasts, and all that happened organically. It just happened by providing a really fun time, kind of the stars aligned around it, and we would always, do special things, where people like really look forward to like what the new shirt's going to be. We do a new shirt every year, and me being a designer, I care about the design of all that. So it's like a shirt I would actually wear, so like there's details like that are in it. And then we did the Saturday barbecue. We started doing this, raffle component, there was kind of more to it than just going to a track day. It really was, and is, the Honda Meet still exists, but we don't talk about it because we kind of protect it.
Okay.
It might have just blown it. But it very much became this community, and all that ended up evolving into GridLife. As I started to get, I was going through my kind of agency career, and I was getting into these. I was doing like a couple different things. So like my final title, I am an expat of agencies now, because I've been doing GridLife and just GridLife for the last year, but I had kind of climbed the ladder in the agency world. I was a creative director. I was overseeing a couple of pretty large accounts, Hewlett Packard being one of them, the North Face being another, so I was kind of in, a point in my career where I was looking for kind of the next step, and in advertising, when you get to kind of that point, there's a couple of paths forward. You can kind of stay where you are. You can make some lateral moves and do different stuff. You can take a step up into like agency management. You can take another step up and get a little bit further away from the craft and start to kind of manage more of the teams. And I ended up just inherently kind of starting these side hustles. So I was really into music as well, and I've gone to like a ton of different festivals, and I had a bunch of artists that I was friends with from Chicago, basically a lot of the EDM artists and hip hop artists that were kind of rising out of Chicago around 2005, 2006. I became really close personal friends with. So as their careers were taking off, I started doing kind of these side projects for them. And got to know a lot of the like management teams and a bunch of those guys really well, because I was doing digital advertising on the side for music artists. So that plays into kind of this music component of GridLife. But I was attending a lot of events, a lot of concerts. I was going to South by Southwest every year. I was going to a lot of festivals because my friends were now playing these festivals. So, I was seeing kind of the rise of festival culture and these festival experiences. And then at the same time, being in advertising, I'm looking at the parallels of like how brands are integrating into them and how, different ideas in the digital space are being implemented into festivals and things of that nature. But all the while I'm still into car stuff. So I think right around like 2012, there was a bunch of other track days that were popping up, and I was noticing kind of our community, like the community we built out of Honda Meet, wanted to track more frequently, so Honda Meet's one time a year.
Okay. Yeah. You're like a Halo event.
Yeah. We've got this one event. There's a ton of people coming to it, and some of those people just track once a year, but, we had kind of, put this bug into a lot of different people, and now they were looking for more outlets for it. So I looked at it. I was like, I think we should maybe do more Honda Meets, or maybe we should do more track days. So I was thinking about that, not necessarily as a business venture either, but just like, hey, maybe there's more opportunities that all of these friends can come together, to do track stuff. And then, at the same time, I had all these friends that were car guys and girls that weren't coming to the racetrack. So, as I was like kind of figuring out what I wanted to do professionally, and like I was working at these side hustles with music stuff, and then I started to think a little bit more about Honda Meet as, like maybe that's a thing I can do, a little bit different than what I'm doing in advertising. And all the while I never really thought or tangibly said, I got to get out of advertising, but that's kind of what was naturally happening. I was like getting a little bit bored, I guess, for lack of a better term, in what I was doing in advertising, and like looking for other ways to start to like take what I know about marketing, advertising, building experiences and starting to apply it to the things that I have a ton of passion for, which is music and cars. The
next step is to just mix the two.
Yeah, that's kind of inherently what happens. So like the strategic nugget that ultimately, started GridLife was I talked about it, and the first GridLife was in 2014. I think I talked about this idea like in 2012 is when kind of the original idea for it was. I was like, what if we could figure out a way to get all these segmented parts of automotive communities, because I've got friends who are car show guys, and I've got friends that are drifters, and we're all friends, and occasionally we would cross paths at like a Thursday night meetup or something, but it was not very frequent that we would do car stuff together outside of those like little moments. And I was like, why doesn't anyone come to the racetrack? Like, why aren't all the car show guys coming to the racetrack? Or I was just thinking about like ways to kind of get all these different communities together, and ultimately that was what GridLife was founded on. Was like trying to get all of my different segments of friends to come to the track. Yeah. So me being super into music and seeing a bunch of kind of the back end of that world and festival stuff, and having access to a bunch of artists that are friends, I came up with the idea of like, what if we throw basically like a mini music festival, with the track at the heart of it all. And that was kind of the concept for the first GridLife, was taking that festival atmosphere. There's multiple things to do, and again, I like kind of built an event based off of my own preferences, because I go to car shows and I'm a little bit bored after about an hour.
You walk around, you look at the cars, and then that's about it, huh? Yeah,
and I go to a track day. If I'm not driving, I'm a little bit bored after about an hour, drift events are pretty, pretty engaging. But a lot of drift events, they happen in parking lots, so like, it's like it's hard to like gauge driver skill, and outside of the smoke, like, again, if you're not a part of that community, you
don't really know. Yeah.
You get an hour, you're kind of over it, in some capacity. So, thinking about an event that has a bunch of things to do so that you can kind of curb and eliminate that boredom.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of thinking back to the good old days, not really, but like, seeing a lot of the Nopi stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a, nationwide traveling event that had like drag racing and car show and music and bikini contests, like, kind of along the same lines, but
yep.
That was, again, it was like centered around drag racing. That was the real reason for it was the drag racing. And then everything else was like to get people to do something, get them a reason to come out there kind of deal.
Yeah, and like I think I attended one Nopi event that was in St. Louis. So, and I think that might have been on like the tail end of the Nopi heyday. So people make that reference all the time, where it's like, oh, it's like, it's like bringing back the Nopi days. And like I wish I would have like seen the Nopi days to like.
Yeah, I don't think I actually ever went to one. It just, you hear about them and they were huge events,
Huge events.
And we've interviewed several people that were like big drag racers in the Nopi events kind of deal. So yeah, it's something that I never got to experience, but again, the promoters and the people that created that were probably thinking the same thing, like, what are we going to do to get people to come out here and watch the event and stay out here?
No, absolutely. And like, even when I mean, like I looked at like even some like large car shows like in Import Alliance and some of these other events that are just massive, and I'm like, I don't like what's going on here. So like it's 2 days of car parking, and like I look at it and I was like trying to figure out how to like augment additional stuff or to get that type of enthusiasm around a motorsports event, like a grassroots motorsports event, because like I don't know, cars in motion to me are always much more exciting or engaging than cars that are parked. So GridLife will always be centered, in motorsports and have that grassroots motorsports piece at the center, and at the heart of it all, But when I thought about just kind of the segmentation and the way that different communities sometimes kind of scoff at each other, I wanted to like build something that tried to get bridges between those and like eliminate that segregation. So the Nopi events, people make reference to that. I think that, drag racing at the heart of that was what was hot at the time. That was Fast and Furious days. I mean, 2001, and when that faded out, I think there's like an opportunity to kind of take motorsports and rebuild the cool, in it the same way that kind of rose out of that era. And I happen to be into track racing, so that's
worked out pretty well then. Yeah,
where the centers of the events is. So GridLife's been like a long build. It probably feels to external people that like someone looking at it from afar that we're kind of rising out of nowhere and we're growing really fast. But
it came from like 2004 when you were doing just a group of buddies getting together and renting a track, huh?
Yep. And the community that is our drivers, even our time attack regulars and our HPDE regulars, all of those, a lot of those people are still, in the mix from, some part of that era. So we've got people that have been with us since 2004. We've got a lot of people like 2007 and on, like almost all those people are still in the community, so
that's cool.
That's a pretty key piece of like what we have built and how we continue to build it. We look at it as a community. It's not about throwing as much stuff in to the experience as possible to try and bring as many people in as possible, as fast as possible. It's about this kind of slow growth and this delivering on a best weekend ever type experience for everyone that comes to our events, so that they stay with us and they continue to come back to our events and become a part of the fabric of GridLife and bring a couple other people with them. So like that growth pattern is kind of what we're after, and we do talk about it, and it is about building a community ultimately.
Yep. Well, on that, let's take a real quick break here, and then we'll be right back. We are hosting our next Essentials of Operating a Shop seminar during the PRI show in Indianapolis, Indiana on December 6th. We developed this one-day seminar to help shop owners rethink how they run their business. We cover topics like employee management, best practices for accounting, improving customer service, and many more. It doesn't matter whether you've been in business for 20 years or haven't even opened yet, you will get useful information and helpful business practices to improve the operations at your shop and be more profitable. You can find out more information about the seminar and sign up by going to the Events tab on the Do It For a Living Facebook page or by visiting the website at doitforalivingpodcast.com. So, Chris, it sounds like you had the professional job for a long time, like the real adult job. So you mentioned earlier that, up until about a year ago, you were doing that and then the Honda Meets and the GridLife stuff. So did you ever kind of envision yourself being an entrepreneur, or is this just kind of something that it has grown over the years, but was that ever something that you saw yourself doing?
I don't know if I even still call myself an entrepreneur. I have a particular, and we talk about this all the time, kind of internally. Is I've got a drive that's always been kind of built into me. I guess that's not always true. I think I was a lazy kid, especially through high school and even in college. I was a class skipper, but when it came to stuff that I was passionate about, I always put a lot of effort into it. And when I got into advertising, I genuinely got into it. I was into it. I lived and breathed it, and it just so happened to be my career. So I was, when I was doing campaigns and thinking about the stuff that I was doing for the clients that I was working for, I was really looking at the world as my peers, the best advertising world.
Yeah, so just kind of transitioned easily into doing the car stuff full time.
Yeah. It just ended up, like that. It was just I put everything into it, when I was doing advertising stuff, and then the same thing kind of happened naturally when I was doing GridLife, or when I fully started to commit to it. So I think, the story of GridLife being sustained or sustainable. I think we're still marching towards sustainability. It's been a ton of investment, every year. And the first GridLife was built on my credit cards, which I think I'm still paying off, so it was I had this idea that I felt really strongly about, and I was like, this could be cool. I'd like to see this happen. And I just made it happen. I figured it out. I maxed out every card that I had. I didn't really have savings by any means, but all of my financial efforts went into seeing that first year, along with all of my kind of heart and soul, outside of what ultimately just became the obligations to my day job. So, as passion just started to shift, and I was still doing GridLife as a side hustle, 2014, and that first event, I remember the event starting, and that event was about 1,800 people. It was big.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big track day, but it wasn't a big event, not as big as GridLife is now, but the position I had from, again, a strategic focus, I guess you could call it, is I wanted to make sure that we were looking at the experience model of looking at an experience model for every attendee. So it was about, this doesn't have to be the biggest event. I just need to make sure.
Are they having the most fun?
Yes. Are they having the most fun? And that came from, as I got, deeper and deeper into advertising, I was doing a ton of pitch work. So I was putting together these really robust, decks explaining how a full campaign would work with a bunch of different facets. So it wasn't I was just making a website, or I was just making a TV commercial, or I was just making a banner ad. I was overseeing the entirety of all of that. So when we looked at it, we had, a thing called the customer journey, so like I took kind of what I knew about campaigns and the customer journey and applied that to GridLife. So when I started to build that brand, or the brand of GridLife, I was looking at how does somebody find out about the event? How do they purchase a ticket to the event? What are these experience touch points? What does it feel like when they get to the gate? How do they get to their camping spot? What's the vibe when they get there? What happens, when they wake up on Saturday morning? Like all these things I'm thinking about and looking at all these touch points, and making sure it doesn't matter how big the event is. It's about like, are those things considered? And like not everything has to have some set of fireworks behind it, but like we do look at all these different segments of people that attend the events. Like the driver experience is different than the spectator experience, is, different than the car show experience. And even from like day one, that's how I thought about the event. I was thinking about it from this experience perspective. So that first year, I knew it wasn't going to be that big, and I knew it was going to be a loss, but I still wanted to deliver on the idea and the concept and make sure it was a good time. And I remember like the main stage, like come like 7 o'clock, and like that was when my like real headliners started to come on, because like at a music festival, 7 o'clock, that's a pretty big artist usually, like because the music like starts at 1, but the track had just gone cold and like the stage fired up, and like there was very few people at the stage, and I was like, what is going on? And everyone was like out in the paddock having barbecues and doing after track stuff, and then come dark, as soon as like 9 o'clock rolled around, everybody started to get up out of their paddock spaces and walk towards the stage, and then by like 11 p.m. it was a full party. And like, that's when I knew it was a thing. I was like standing side stage, like looking out at the car community that I knew, and like, there's definitely like people in the car community that are into music, but, this was like, it wasn't a music crowd. It was a car crowd that was getting down to, like a music festival environment. They were like letting loose, and it was just it was super cool. That was when I knew that this could be a thing, and that I was going to keep doing it.
Have you had any like bad experiences with doing this?
So Road Atlanta, which our first year was last year, in 2016. So Road Atlanta came about because they reached out to us about interest in our event. They had found out about our event somehow, through whatever type of scouting, and they reached out to us and said, hey, what do you think about talking about maybe doing an event at Road Atlanta, and like at that time, this is 2015, we just did 2 years at Gingerman with this new concept that was growing, and it all felt, we were still pretty unsure about it all, like where it was going, but like it felt like a thing, and I'm still working the day job. I'm not really thinking that this is going to be more than a side hustle. I mean, I have hopes and dreams that it might be, but it's not anywhere near that, and then this world-class facility calls us and asks us if we want to think about doing GridLife at Road Atlanta. So like, we're getting starry-eyed, and like ambitions are raging inside of my head about like, bringing GridLife to a place like Road Atlanta. So we ended up going down there, and touring the facility and talking to them. And I put together this, this proper pitch about who we are, our background, what our intentions are, and, to have the opportunity to like produce an event where Petit Le Mans is at and Formula Drift is at, I couldn't even have fathomed it at that time, so they present us with this opportunity. Road Atlanta is a very prestigious facility. It's a world-class facility. It has a world-class price tag that goes along with it. Very much elevated from a club circuit like a Gingerman or something like that, and rightfully so. It's got much more capacity and facilities and what have you. So. We debated for a long time whether we're going to do that event, and we ultimately decided to do it. going into that event, it was very clear that we were not going to make the numbers that we needed for that to be sustainable overall.
Yeah.
You know, so like we went all in with Atlanta. So like I booked Waka Flocka, which is our biggest booking yet. You know, we booked Andrew WK, which is a super big booking. You know, so all those have really hefty price tags to them too. You know, and like we were going all in with like we moved over to like a rock and hip hop programming for music. You know, I had, you know, I'm bringing out all the celebrity drifters that I can, and they're supporting us and trying to get the word out. You know, but we're also marching into a new market. You know, and we're marching into a market we don't know, a community that we don't have. You know, in the Southeast, like we hadn't established yet. We're Midwest based. All of our friends are in the Midwest. You know, so you know, I think going into that event, you know, we were basically trying to figure out how we were going to get the dollars we needed to be able to open the gates. You know, and this is like 2 weeks out, right? Like I'm debating on, all right, dude, does this event happen? Like, are we going to be able to figure this out? Like, do I pull the plug? Do I take the loss? You know, do we figure out a way to press on and do it? You know, and ultimately going back to that philosophy of we do what we say we're going to do. You know, about, I don't know, I started like prepping things and setting it up to like find a way to make it happen. And the week before the event, I was actually already down in Atlanta. I ended up refinancing my house.
Okay.
And like kind of putting it all on the line and rolling the dice, you know, to make sure that the event would happen. And then after like crossing that hurdle, knowing that like I don't know where we're going to be on the other side of this, we're going to focus on delivering that experience. So we're going to make sure that like everybody, you know, I think we had sold like 700 tickets, you know, pre-sale or something, and the Midwest we're used to selling all of our tickets ahead of time.
Like 3,000, huh?
Yeah, like I've built it so that, you know, like we've always sold out. The Midwest event is always sold out like basically the day of. So there's hardly any gate sales. It's all preload because the event is
it's all full. Yeah.
It's basement built too. It's like built off of, you know, my own investment. So like we add to the experience as the tickets sell. We sell another 200 tickets, then we like get a better artist, or we buy another set of lasers, or like whatever, you know. So like all that stuff like builds as the event builds. At least that's the way, you know, it had all kind of started. You know, in Atlanta we had to do a ton of investment up front, you know, so like the pre-sales weren't there, and all the folks at Road Atlanta are like, oh, we're an at gate, you know, event, you know, like the Southeast is, you know, a door sales kind of thing, so hope for good weather, it's going to be fine, you know. And I'm like, I'm not so sure, guys. You know, so we had like, you know, anyway, I put it all on the line, and I was like, we're going to, you know, if 700 people show up or 7,000 people show up, it doesn't matter. We're going to deliver that experience for the people who attend, you know, the inaugural event of GridLife South, and so, that's our goal now. Our eyes are on that prize. Forget about
you built it. You know, did they come?
They did.
Okay. That's good.
So they didn't come in the capacity that made that like it still didn't work out financially for that first year by any means, but we didn't have to fold the company. Okay. So it worked out well enough. But I think we ended up you know, about depending on like how you calculate it, was like 2,800 people, drivers and all, you know, in for that event for year one in Atlanta. Yeah. The lesson coming out of it was like this. It felt like I had almost forgotten how GridLife had grown or how it had built. It felt like the first year Midwest all over again with a bigger facility and bigger artists, but it still had that like magic of the seed. You could like see the seed sprout over the weekend, like you felt it, you know, like the energy and the vibe, you know. And then fast forward a year later, you know, GridLife Atlanta, GridLife South, I think is definitely that kind of cemented itself in the culture, and like you're seeing a whole new community build around that event. You know, we had double-digit growth again from year 1 to year 2 for GridLife South. So it's like the same pattern and the same path as Midwest we're seeing replicated in that new market. So yeah, I mean, it hasn't been easy. I mean, like I remember sitting in the hotel room going, what am I going to do? You know, and I'm like looking at these loan documents, you know, like like ready to sign it all away, you know. But
you took a chance, and you worked hard and it paid off. So that's good that it's like growing and working.
It's paying off. You know?
Yeah, it's paying off eventually, but you know, at least it didn't kill you.
It didn't kill us. It might have killed somebody else. I don't know. I have a resilience.
But you're too stubborn to quit, huh?
For risk. I mean, I don't know if it's stubborn. My risks are definitely very strategic. You know, like I don't blindly jump into the deep end. You know, but I definitely, you know, I'm not afraid to like try stuff. You know, and the GridLife South and moving to Road Atlanta, you know, 3 years into an event concept, could probably be described as ambitious, you know, but we're still here.
That's good. So. Yeah, you're still here. Very cool. Well, let's take another quick break here, and then we'll be right back.
We all know owning a shop is difficult, so we created My Shop Assist to help you manage the various jobs. Whether you run a machine shop, a performance tuning shop, build off-road trucks, or even do powder coating, My Shop Assist can help you. It is completely online and will help you schedule the jobs, log time on each task, track parts orders, and take pictures of the work. You can even export your jobs from My Shop Assist into QuickBooks as invoices. So if you're interested to improve operations at your shop, check out myshopassist.com to start your 30-day free trial.
So how do you manage all of these people, or like keep them, you know, delegate tasks or keep them on track when you're there, when the event's going on?
If we get into the tech of it, so like from a business perspective, we all the core team members and all the leads are on Slack, and we use Slack as our company communication tool, if you will. So a lot of that stuff is organized that way, and then we keep a lot of spreadsheets and manage a lot of spreadsheets all through Google Drive. So that's kind of how all that stuff is coordinated ahead of time. Is you know, all that stuff happens through Slack, and we're all in like kind of daily communication, even those that are working full-time jobs and doing this very much in a part-time capacity. You know, that's how all of that stuff is organized, and how all that communication happens. And then we do separate weekly meetings, more so when we're leading up to the events, with each of those team leads. So we'll have like a track team meeting, and that's an hour call once a week, you know, sometimes more, you know, and we'll have, you know, a ticketing team or a gate team, you know, meeting, and more meetings leading up to each event. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like understanding of how, you know, or GridLife as a whole wants these things to run, and then we communicate it down to leads who manage the teams that exist beneath them.
Very cool.
You know, so, you know, to say that people work just at the event is a little bit false, because there's a lot leading up to it that needs to get done. No, absolutely. And like, even just like communication, like you're always going to save effort and hardship and stress by doing work ahead of time to make sure that when you're, you know, on site and the panic of it all is, you know, right in your face, that you've got the tools you need to like execute whatever issue is in front of you. So, and, you know, we've got all types of different, you know, touch points. GridLife is a very complex machine. You know, we've got all the issues of a music festival and a track day, and a drift event, and a camping event. You know, I mean, like all that stuff. There's just a lot of moving parts, and we're getting better all the time. I mean, it's still very much like a learning experience. Like, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we're like, we got it. You know, like, like year 4 is so much better than year 1, but, you know, year 5, there's so many things we want to improve, you know? So, you know, that's a constant evolution, and a constant, you know, learning of new processes and easier things and better ways to do things, you know, for every aspect of the event.
Well, with you coming from like an advertising and marketing background, what have you found to be the best ways to promote the events?
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about like our audience growth, like it's a little bit like a little bit of a blend between digital content promotion. So we use a lot of we use social primarily. That's our main channel. So Facebook is the way that we communicate event announcements and kind of get the hype train going, so to speak. And we use a lot of video content for promotion. So GridLife is a very tough thing to explain to people. Like, you can't really put it in a headline what the experience is.
With like a list of 4 things.
Right. No, it's like I mean, it's super hard to describe. It's even hard to describe it. I mean, it's even hard to show. Like, to feel the vibe of GridLife is the only way you can do it is to attend GridLife. Like, it genuinely has this magic that you cannot translate to any medium. But the best medium that gets the closest is through video. So now that we have multiple years and a whole lot of hype video, both music and motorsports and drifting and car show stuff and crowds and all those things, we use a lot of hype reels or sizzle reels that we distribute via a paid strategy to reach particular audiences. So the audience that we market to is a motorsports and automotive audience. We do very rarely do we market to a music festival audience. GridLife is intended to be a car event first and a festival second. So even as our lineups grow and get more prestigious and the headliners get bigger, what we're trying to do ultimately is inject something special into the automotive crowd versus bring a bunch of people from outside into the automotive crowd. There definitely is bleed over, and we do market with a bleed over, because if you're remotely interested in cars, you're going to come to GridLife and you're going to have a good time because, there's so much happening. It's basically all the cool stuff on the internet in real life, for 3 days, So, but we do want to make sure that the people who are attending are, have some interest in cars and in automotive, something, they think they're cool, or, they, whatever, it is marketed to a car crowd first, and then
you're pretty heavy on the direct, audience marketing on Facebook, paid advertising for that kind of stuff.
Yes. So we use paid advertising, and then we augment that with influencer strategies. So, we've been fortunate to, have a lot of friends now friends that are advocates for the event, that we've built up over the course of the 4-year history of GridLife. So, the other strategy is, using those expanded audiences and those channels for advocacy. So that's a little bit more of the grassroots level of things, I guess. I mean, it's not street team stuff, but it's an influencer strategy where we try to get people who, have an audience and have influence to talk about the events in a positive light and help promote it ahead of time, to get some of their fans to come out. And it's pretty easy, because we deliver a really, really good time for everyone who comes out, so
really, so it's easy to have them advertise for you.
You don't really have to ask too hard. We get some really good quotes that come out naturally because it's GridLife's designed to be a good time. It's designed to celebrate stuff that we all love, so.
And so one of those partners that, is now even more recognized would be Andy Smedegaard and the RS Motors Evo, which is now, I think, the fastest Evo ever at Buttonwillow, if I'm not mistaken. But,
I believe it is.
And so he's been a huge advocate of the GridLife stuff. And, it's obviously plastered all on the side of his car. So, how is it, building those relationships with drivers and, having them support your brand, help the business?
Yeah. I mean, when we look at GridLife as a community, so it's like, it's not really like, we don't even really talk about it like, it's not like, hey, will you promote GridLife? It all of it's been like pretty natural because, we all kind of share the same philosophy and spirit around motorsports and like grassroots motorsports community. So, the relationship with Andy, came about where, he had come out, and the 365 Racing guys, they came out to the first GridLife event, and I didn't know them before that. Like they came out and, all of those guys, all the RS Motors guys and 365 Racing guys are about grassroots motorsports to the core. They race all the time, all different forms of racing. Andy's got a bunch of different vehicles, and
literally 365 days a year.
Literally 365 days a year. So, they came out to the first event. I don't remember exactly like how we started chatting, but they were involved with Proving Grounds, which people make. I've never been to Proving Grounds, and I wasn't totally aware of it when like GridLife began. People make a lot of parallel comparisons between Proving Grounds
and that's the MA Performance event, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So that's the MA Performance event. So they were doing some stuff with Proving Grounds, kind of in the spirit of what we were starting with Time Attack, and being that they were always looking for like kind of new outlets for, grassroots competition. There hadn't been a lot of investment in Time Attack, particularly in the Midwest. Time Attack existed in, as Global Time Attack and Redline Time Attack, and that was the West Coast and Road Atlanta. I know they had like a brief tour that they did, years ago where they hit Audubon Country Club and a bunch of different tracks. But, the core of Time Attack communities has been in the Southeast, sort of, and the West Coast. So I think Andy was really excited, and all those guys were kind of excited about the idea of something new from a competition standpoint. And then they came out to the first event, and I think we delivered on that experience model where, they walked away thinking that this was pretty cool, and then they had a really good time. So I can't remember how we started talking, Andy and I, but I remember like very quickly, I like identified him as someone that like had, shared that kind of same spirit, and kind of got what we were trying to do. So I remember like bouncing ideas off of him as we were like developing the Time Attack series and like making rule changes and like, thinking about, different stuff. And I still do that. Like when we talk about rule changes and anything that we're going to make to the Time Attack format or the Time Attack series, Andy's one of the go-to guys that I bounce ideas off of. But I think when we ended up putting GridLife on the Evo, I asked him if he wanted to go out to Super Lap Battle and represent us. So the Super Lap Battle, I think, up until that point, had a few people that traveled out from the Midwest, but we had like kind of this rising Time Attack culture, in our events, and I wanted to go and support Time Attack as a whole and get some people to go out to Super Lap Battle, and then I wanted to represent the Midwest, and I ultimately asked Andy to do it. And I think that's kind of where that started. So he's had, GridLife liveries for two different versions of it. The first one is the kind of teal and red one, and then this new one we did with Stance Suspension, which is his suspension partner, and the TF Works guys helped us design that. We did that as a collaboration, But yeah, I mean, we're making like when we think about all the different facets of GridLife, people talk about GridLife sometimes as a drift event because drifting is visceral and very intensely engaging by default, and the biggest celebrities that come out to the events are drifters. But the core of what we do is that grassroots driving experience. So Andy's a really good example of we try to kind of celebritize, grassroots drivers and their cars and, how they perform on the track. I mean, we've got a lot of track records and really, really impressive times at all of the tracks that we go to from all these drivers, and we try to highlight them and use the GridLife platform to help their programs. And I think Andy is an example of that, probably one of the best examples of, the mutual benefit of, us working together. So, yeah, I mean,
it's very cool. He's done a lot with that car, so I'm excited to see what else they're able to do with it coming up.
I don't know. Sky's the limits with those guys. Like they definitely put their eyes on the prize and chase it. So very, very driven individuals. But I mean, I think we look at the community as being another part of that promotion, which is goes back to showing the organic pace of our growth. By delivering on that experience, people discover GridLife because there's some hype video and it looks cool, and then they come to the event and they have the best time ever, hopefully, and then the next year they come back and they bring 2 friends, and then you end up with this audience. Road Atlanta gave us probably one of the best compliments I've gotten about our crowd is, they said your crowd, when we did that first event, they were prepared for the worst. They were like, oh my God, Waka Flocka's coming to our racetrack. They're going to burn this place down. They were terrified. They were terrified of, what the GridLife crowd was going to be like. And, ultimately at the end, and they said this year, they're like, this is one of the best behaved crowds we've ever had, of any event, more considerate than petite. It really is a community.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's good to get that affirmation that the community that you've built is a good one,
right? And I think that has a lot to do with that organic growth, because we're super visible. I'm driving around in a tiny little Japanese key van, and everyone else, Adam's super visible and Holly's super visible, so there's a good chance that 1 out of every 10 people has a personal connection to somebody who is putting the event on, and that makes a community that self-polices in some capacity. So it's GridLife is a good time, but the one thing that it's not is an out of control good time, and that's important. That's important. It's important for people to be able to let loose, but for them,
don't stay up too late. But what is your 1-year plan for GridLife? What is the 28? What are you working for in 2018? So I guess part of it is the Tugay battle.
Yeah, and we're gonna rebrand that for GridLife stuff. But
okay.
for the 1-year plan is this year is all about stability and sustainability. So. Last year we made some pretty big moves. The year before we made,
adding Road Atlanta was a big move.
Even bigger moves, right? So 2016 we made the big move of adding Road Atlanta, and then in 2017 that's when we moved to a 5-round time attack format. We really solidified a proper points championship.
Mm-hmm.
We added Mid-Ohio. We started to kind of grow beyond Gingerman and Autobahn and those core tracks that we had been at for more than a decade, and started to invest in motorsports legitimacy for the GridLife program and the GridLife platform. So we're going to stay the course with that. For 2018, there's not going to be any major schedule changes. We did those big ads over the last 2 years, and now we're just going to continue to feed those investments. So the schedule next year is going to be about the same. It's our 5th anniversary for Gingerman for the Midwest event. So we're going to be doing some special things and really dialing in that event in particular, and celebrating that the fact that we've survived 5 years in this concept, cool. which is a pretty big deal. So there's definitely going to be some special things for that event. And as far as evolution of kind of the different facets, there's a bunch of mean, there's a bunch of things that happen within GridLife events, particularly the festival. So more refinement for the drift platform and the drift program. So we're going to be doing kind of this golden ticket format for distributing drift spots, and continuing to work on that and make drift. Drift is already a pretty hefty centerpiece of the GridLife festival format, but we're going to be making some changes to amplify that a little bit, maybe some special drift formats outside of just kind of the open lap bash style sessions. And then with Time Attack, going to be continuing to invest in that program. Last year we did the Gears and Gasoline series, which we helped.
It's like high production value, like long videos.
Yep. So long form stories, coverage from every single round. We're going to be continuing to do that. So that we worked with Gears and Gasoline, and we've GridLife funded that production, but we use the Gears and Gasoline channel as a part of the amplification strategy to like basically get more eyes towards our competitors and towards Time Attack. We're going to continue that for next year, but then we're also going to be adding some more real-time coverage from additional outlets, both covering drivers, builds, and the series as a whole, as we start to continue to kind of legitimize Time Attack and invest in that competition format. In regards to the bracket battles or the toge format, we're not going to be switching the entire season over to that format, but we're going to be probably test betting it at 2 events this year. So the cool thing about that, for those that don't know what toge is or what the bracket battles is, or even what Time Attack is, Time Attack in its simplest form is just racing against the clock. So it's usually about 15 cars on the track at a time, and they're driving, to beat the best times. And the hard thing about Time Attack, I think, from a spectator perspective, is that it feels like a track day, and the event can be won in the first session of the first day. And you might not know it. You might not know it, and then if you don't have context to the cars, you don't know why that car is awesome, and you don't know why a 143 is fast. And you can explain that through announcing, but in the hot lap format, at least the way that it's been structured in the States thus far, it's still very tough to follow as a spectator. Like, you kind of got to be one of the nerds to really get it. But the toge format, or the bracket battle format, changes all that, because it presents the vehicles 2 at a time, and creates drama at every turn. Because every moment matters. Like, basically, the way that it works is it uses one day as a qualifying session, and then we're taking all the drivetrain delineations, because normally Time Attack is broken out by front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, and we throw that out the window, and then we just use times to put 2 cars against each other head to head. And it feels like wheel to wheel racing, but it's not wheel to wheel racing, because you can't pass. But more importantly, it feels like the last lap of the most intense wheel-to-wheel race you've ever watched.
Yeah, each round.
over and over and over and over and over again. So you end up with these cars that could be completely different formats. It could be an Integra versus an Evo, but based off of
what the
cars can do, they're a second apart from each other. So you start to add in the element of driver consistency and the potential for driver error and the pressure of another car that's in proximity, and it changes.
The ability for the car to stay together.
It's got to stay together for at least 3 laps, So, I think for a long time, and not that there's anything wrong with traditional Time Attack, and not that we won't still do some traditional Time Attack where you've got these 1-lap machines, but like it becomes a dollar battle, from a grassroots perspective, and I think, some of the battles some of the things that we've heard from a Time Attack perspective is people have a reluctancy to participate, sometimes because the cars that are at the top of the field are so ridiculous, and Time Attack is all about lap records. It's about
the fastest of the fast,
which doesn't happen all the time. So like this format celebrates those vehicles. It gives them all a place to race, but it makes more elements of it matter. So like lap records are cool, and we still want to celebrate those things, and have a platform for it. but from a competition perspective and a spectator perspective, the bracket battles is just so much more engaging. And you're able to present cars differently because there's only 2 of them to talk about and they're showcased. So I think that Time Attack can be just as big of a centerpiece from a spectator perspective as Drift presented in this format. I really believe that.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it and a good point. I think this, and obviously you've shown that the spectators like it too. So I'm excited to see it at one of the events. So maybe I'll go participate in one as well. But I don't think I'd be one of the fastest cars. So have a slow bracket for
what we do. I mean, it's all still kind of broken out by the
that's how they do it with the roll racing guys. It's really just broken down into like 3 or 4 or 2 or 3. I guess it's 3 brackets at like TX2K. So I like the idea, and I've never seen it done at Time Attack. So that's why I think it's really cool.
I don't know if it's ever been done at Time Attack this way.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And that's it, right? Like, to understand a bracket, I mean, that's the way drifting does it. That's the way roll racing does it. It like starts to build these rivalries and the celebration of the drivers as individuals, and you just can present it. It's drama, right? Like, it adds drama to all these moments. And at Time Attack events, you're lucky if you get the drama that you want in the final session of the final day. But up until that point, it's hard to follow.
You kind of have to be watching it the whole time. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything. But what about like the 5-year plan? So what do you anticipate for like the 10-year anniversary of the Gingerman event?
Who knows? So I mean, like,
it's like so up in the air, it's hard to even think about it.
No, I mean, I think about it, but I don't know. Like, it's always changing, And there's a ton of different ways that we can take it, So like we talk about, like, because of the nature of this podcast and the nature of both of our backgrounds, we're talking about the motorsports aspect of GridLife and how it exists as a car event, but we are also a festival property.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's a whole bunch of conversations that I have, and like I almost sometimes, especially during SEMA time and like in between SEMA and PRI, where it's motorsports, like we've got a very unique property that exists in the festival world, so festival business is a huge business, so and these mega festivals are starting to fade, and niche festivals are starting to rise, and we are very much a part of that conversation, so like when we talk to people from the music industry and talk to people from the festival industry, they look at us completely different. They don't know anything about cars. They don't understand the details and the intricacies of Time Attack or drifting or whatever, but they're like, wow, there's something different.
You've got a younger demographic that has some, well, maybe not some, but at least a little bit of expendable income, to spend on their hobbies. So that can be an attractive customer base for sure.
No, and so I mean, I think as a the 5-year plan is to kind of continue to grow the festival format. I think that's our unique.
Just doing like more. I mean, obviously the logical step is more tracks. Having more in the series. So
So I mean, when we look at, I mean, let me back up for kind of a second, and I mean, I think as we start to expand, right, and like this year we made the decision. There's definitely like an ask for something on the West Coast. There's an ask for something in the Northeast, and there's no shortage of people saying, come to this track, or you should go to Florida, or you should do this, or you should do that. And there also is no shortage of facilities that are reaching out saying, hey, we like what you're doing, we'd love to see it at our track, which is great. That's really awesome to like kind of have all these motorsports facilities seeing what we're doing and recognizing it as an opportunity to, bring cool stuff all over the country. I think we're not going to bring GridLife anywhere with any haste unless we think it's going to, it's guaranteed to feel like a GridLife event. So what that means is like we don't have to go to California, or just as an example, and do a 10,000 person event in order for us to feel like it's a success, but we do have to go there and have enough people come where we can carry the spirit and the energy and the vibe of what a GridLife event is and make sure that that is delivered upon. So, that was kind of, we talked about like, should we make these moves this year, 2018? There's a lot of people asking for it. The irons are hot. The awareness is up. Is now the time to make the move? And ultimately we decided that it's not, but we're staying the course for 2018 so that we can work on 2019 earlier. So eventually, I think what I would love to see is 2 or 3 festivals, and then regionalized time attack series that all kind of culminate at those festivals, or culminate at one festival. So, as we continue to kind of invest in the time attack series, and that gains legitimacy and audience, and more people get into that format of competition, and we're able to grow people out of HPDE into time attack. I would love to see a Midwest, a Northeast, a Southeast, and a West Coast and a Central region that all kind of comes together for more of like a runoff style thing at one of the bigger festivals at the end of the year. So that's kind of one path forward, is starting to go to more tracks and start to kind of branch out of the Midwest and like expand and grow those communities. I think the first of which would be the Southeast. So, I think we'll evaluate kind of how healthy that community is, where the opportunity for growth of that community is, and then maybe look at, adding a track that connects the dots, like an NCM, or an Atlanta Motorsports Park, or a Carolina Motor Speedway, or Charlotte Motor Speedway, or something, and start to like get more events that are within the regions that our festivals are around. But slow and steady really is the course that we're taking. So there's no plans to take over the world. We're really trying to support, and grow grassroots motorsports as a whole. So, we work with SCCA, we work with a bunch of, different car show promoters. We're friendly with everybody because this community is way too niche for like aggressive competition. For lack of a better description, like we all need to really like bolster and work together so that we can keep grassroots motorsports alive and keep it flourishing. So partnerships aren't off the table. Those types of expansions aren't off the table. But we feel really good about where we are right now. So we're going to continue to grow that and make sure that the moves that we make are very focused.
Very cool. Very cool. It's excellent insight. And, I obviously wish you guys the best of luck with expanding it. For our listeners, what's how do they find out more information about you guys?
Yeah. So, our website is www.grid.life. So it's no .com, it's a .life. So that's where most of the major announcements we're going to be putting I think this has still got a lot of information from 2017, but this is getting an overhaul very soon with the 2018 stuff. Our schedule and rule set should be announced at PRI this year. So coming up in just a few weeks, we'll have all the information for the 2018 season, all 5 events along with the festival dates as well. And then we are on all socials under GridLife Official. So that's facebook.com/GridLife Official and Instagram.com/GridLife Official. And between all those channels, you should be able to find all the info that you want about the GridLife events and the Time Attack series as well as the festivals.
Awesome, man. Well, you've definitely built something really cool, and I'm excited to see it grow, and I am going to be actively trying to make it out to one of the festivals sometime in 2018.
Yeah, no, so, let me know. We'll make it easy. It really is something that you need to see, and
awesome.
Yeah, like I said, it's the experience is very hard to describe, but when you're there, you'll get it. You'll feel it.
Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Appreciate it as well.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests.